Greetings, fellow book detectives, to a new case of literary intrigue. Grab your magnifying glass as we uncover the secrets hidden within the pages of Klara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Remember, liking and following me on YouTube not only shows your support, but also helps others discover my content. So hit that like button. Hit that subscribe follow button, and let's grow this community together. Pages 148. This novel is set an untold number of years in the future. The protagonist is Klara, who is a type of sentient robot known as an artificial friends, or AF for short. In part 1, she resides in a store as she has not yet been purchased. Klara is the narrator and point of view character. She is highly observant, and she likes to watch people who pass by on the street in front of the store. She is friends with Rozo, another AF in the store, who is waiting to be purchased. AFs are solar-powered, so they occasionally need to sit in direct sunlight to recharge. One day, a girl who appears to be about 14 years old stops in front of the store and talks to Klara through the store window. The girl has a limp and is accompanied by her mother. The girl seems to quickly take a liking to Klara. The girl's name is Josie. The next day, Rosa wonders aloud why she and Klara do not see more AFs pass by on the street. Klara wonders as well. She sees an AF walking with its owner. Klara wonders why the AE does not look happy, and why it is walking several paces behind the owner. The next day, Klara witnesses a man and a woman encounter each other on the street. The man and woman run to each other, hug each other, and cry tears of joy. The woman who runs the store, Klara knows this woman only as manager, says that perhaps the man and woman were separated from each other for a long time. A few days later, Josie and her mother return to the store. Josie talks to Klara again. Josie confides that she has some health issues, but that she will probably be fine. She also hints that she wants to buy Klara. The next day, some construction workers arrive on the street with a large device that Klara refers to as a cootings machine, as it has the word cootings on the side. The device produces much pollution, which seems distasteful to Klara. After several days, the workers finish their work and take away the machine. Later that week, the store receives a shipment of newer model AFs, the B3 model. These models are supposedly more advanced, and customers show much interest in them. Klara is shocked when the B3 AFs act disdainful and superior towards the other AFs. Klara hopes that Josie and her mother will return soon and purchase her. Manager says that Klara should not raise her hopes too high. However, a week later, Josie and her mother arrive in the store. They almost do not see Klara, who has been rotated to the back of the store. When they find Klara, Josie is adamant that they purchase Klara. Manager says that Klara's special skill is her power of keen observation. The mother seems intrigued. Seemingly to test Klara's observational skills, the mother asks Klara to mimic Josie's walk as closely as possible. Klara accomplishes this task easily. However, when Klara then looks at the mother's face, the mother seems to have a strange expression that Klara cannot interpret. Pages 49, 100. In part 2, Klara has been purchased by Josie's mother to be Josie's companion. Josie and her mother live in a large, expensive-looking house in a somewhat rural area. Josie's mother, Chrissy, is a high-powered executive who commutes to work each day. They have a housekeeper named Melania. Klara observes life in the house and begins to acclimate to her role as Josie's companion. Josie and Chrissy seem to have a generally strong relationship, although Chrissy is often busy with work, and Josie's illness sometimes makes her fatigued. Klara enjoys watching the sunset each day, as the area gives an obscured view of it. A few days after Klara's arrival, Josie introduces Klara to Josie's best friend Rick. Rick is somewhat brusque with Klara. Josie explains that Rick is shy. Rick lives nearby with his mother. Rick and Josie have known each other since they were little, and they once agreed to spend their lives with each other. Rick seems to now feel unsure about that plan. Later in the week, Josie has an interaction meeting with other children, her age. Josie and the other children are meant to interact to develop better social skills. Josie wants Rick to attend, but Rick is hesitant as the meeting is solely for lifted children and Rick is not lifted. The narrative does not yet explain the meaning of this term. Rick reluctantly attends. Klara notices the adults acting in an overly polite manner to Rick. Eventually, the adults leave the children alone with each other. Klara observes that most of these children have seemingly unkind demeanors, unlike Josie. The children are interested in Klara and in Rick. The children command Klara to do things, but Klara is programmed to respond only to commands from Josie Chrissy. The children grow bored and more contemptuous. They begin to make fun of Josie and Klara, but Rick stands up to them. Overhearing Rick, the parents of the children grow angry and indignant, and the interaction meeting ends. Over the following weeks, Josie's already subpar health appears to decline further. In an attempt to motivate recovery, Chrissy promises to take Josie to Josie's favorite place if Josie regains relative health. Josie's favorite place is a park called Morgan Falls, which has a picturesque waterfall. On the morning of the trip to Morgan Falls, Josie says that she feels well enough to go. However, it appears to Chrissy that Josie is still noticeably unwell. Chrissy grows quite angry and accuses Josie of lying to her. Then, in a potential attempt to spite Josie, Chrissy says that she and Klara will go to Morgan Falls, leaving Josie in Melania's care at the house. Melania tries in vain to reason with Chrissy. Klara obeys the command from Chrissy, who tells Klara to sit in the passenger seat of the car. Klara observes that, as they drive away from Josie in the house, Josie appears to be sad. While driving, Chrissy begins to express her own frustrations, such as the fact that work and Josie's illness inhibit Chrissy's ability to spend time with Josie. Chrissy talks about Josie's father, from whom Chrissy is divorced. He worked as an engineer, but Chrissy says that he was substituted and has since been unemployed. Pages 101, 153. During Chrissy and Klara's trip to Morgan Falls, Chrissy talks about Sal, Josie's deceased sister. Chrissy says only that Sal died of illness. Chrissy then asks Klara to imitate Josie as closely as possible. Klara is able to imitate Josie's voice, personality, and mannerisms almost perfectly. In Part 3, Josie is gloomy for days following Klara and Chrissy's trip. Josie's health also continues to decline. One day, Klara ventures outside the house on her own. She thinks about a homeless man she saw in front of the store once. The man appeared to be revived from the point of death by special nourishment from the sun. Klara wonders if Josie's health might benefit from such nourishment. The next day, a doctor visits the house to check on Josie. The day after that, Rick visits. Josie and Rick pass the time by drawing and playing word games. Klara listens to their conversation. Josie mentions a man whom she and Chrissy visit in town sometimes. The man has been commissioned to paint a portrait of Josie, and Rick finds that idea odd. After Rick leaves, Klara and Josie discuss him. Klara states her belief that Rick is worried about Josie, specifically that Josie might become unkind like the other lifted children. Josie then talks about her and Rick's plan to spend the rest of their lives together. Josie worries that Rick will never be willing to move out of his home, out of concern for leaving his mother to live alone. Klara does not press for further information on this subject. The next time Rick visits, Josie broaches this subject. She says that he should apply to Atlas Brookings, a university that accepts a small number of non-lifted students each year. Rick says that that plan is not viable. Josie becomes angry and mentions Rick's mother, who is apparently reclusive. Josie and Rick argue, and Rick eventually leaves. A few days later, Josie regrets being harsh with Rick, so she sends Klara to his house with an apology note. Rick allows Klara into his home. Klara sees that the state of the home is rather unkempt. Rick implies that his mother struggles with mental illness and that he often has to take care of her and of the home. Klara does her best to speak to Rick on Josie's behalf. Rick expresses frustration with Josie that she is often not respectful of his wishes or point of view. Klara asks Rick to accompany her to a nearby barn so that Klara can commune with the sun as it sets. Klara believes that she might make a deal with the sun so that it will help to heal Josie. Before Rick and Klara can leave, Rick's mother, Helen, enters the room. Like Josie, Helen also wants Rick to attend Atlas Brookings. Helen is a widow. Helen briefly recalls an odd incident in which she thought she saw Josie's sister, Saul, sometime after Sal's death. Rick and Klara soon leave so that Rick can show Klara the way to the barn. Klara has not told Rick any details of the trip or its purpose, only that it is part of a plan to help Josie. Pages 154-201. With Rick's help, Klara manages to reach the nearby barn just before the sun sets. Before Klara enters the barn, she asks Rick to return to his home and to let her complete this task alone. Rick assents and wishes Klara luck. Inside the barn, Klara looks out at the setting sun through one of the open windows. Klara speaks to the sun and says that she will do whatever the sun asks of her, as long as the sun is willing to heal Josie in return. After Klara states her request, the sunlight seems to shift in the room, highlighting a piece of machinery. Klara reasons that the sun probably dislikes pollution, as pollution often blocks out sunlight. Klara recalls the pollution, producing Keating's machine, and she concludes that the sun is asking her to destroy the machine in exchange for helping Josie. When Klara leaves the barn, the only thing she says to Rick is that she will be able to save Josie as long as she is able to complete a specific task. The next day, Rick arrives at Josie's house so that they can have a reconciliatory conversation. They ask Klara to leave the room and not to listen, so Klara complies. Later in the week, Chrissy says that she and Josie are going into town to meet with Mr. Capaldi, the man commissioned to paint Chrissy's portrait. Chrissy wants Klara to come along. Klara assents, and she wonders if she will be able to sabotage the Keating's machine during the trip. Rick and Josie converse again. Rick says that he has decided to apply to Atlas Brookings. Rick has also agreed to meet with a man who works at that school. The man is an old friend of Helen's, and he might be able to help the case for Rick's admission. Meanwhile, Josie's health continues to decline. Before the trip into the city, Melania speaks privately to Klara. Melania expresses her secret concern that Mr. Capaldi might have some negative ulterior motive for his sessions with Josie. Klara agrees to look into the matter. In Part 4, the day of the trip into town arrives. Josie's father, Paul, has agreed to accompany Josie and Chrissy. Paul and Josie seem to have a good rapport, and Paul is clearly a kind and very intelligent person. Paul and Chrissy converse, and it becomes evident to Klara and the reader that Paul is now unemployed after his job was automated. He now lives in a community of similarly substituted people. He claims to enjoy his life there, although Chrissy has heard that such communities are impoverished and unstable. Chrissy, Paul, Josie, and Klara go to Mr. Capaldi's house in the city. Cryptic arguments between Chrissy and Paul seem to indicate that Mr. Capaldi is doing more than painting Josie's portrait. At Capaldi's house, Klara enters the workshop area of a back room and sees that Capaldi is making a robot body designed to look identical to Josie. Josie is unaware, as she has not been allowed to see the portrait that Capaldi is making. Pages 202-251. After seeing the Josie replica, Klara confers with Capaldi and Chrissy. Capaldi says that the plan is to insert Klara's artificial intelligence into the Josie robot so that Klara can mimic and, in a sense, pun Josie in the event that Josie dies. Capaldi argues that individuality is an illusion, and that if Klara can perfectly mimic Josie, then she will be Josie in the truest sense. It becomes evident that Chrissy and Capaldi tried a similar plan after Saul's death, but that the replica did not work properly. Klara assents to the plan, but she says that Josie might still be able to recover. Klara then privately confers with Paul. Paul dislikes Chrissy's plan and argues that the replica would not truly be Josie. In a following moment, Klara sees the Cooting's machine. Klara tells Paul that if she is able to destroy the machine, Josie's life will be saved. Klara gives no further details, but she asks Paul to trust her. Paul decides to follow Klara's instructions. They covertly approach the Cooting's machine, and Paul instructs Klara on how she might sabotage it. Klara follows his instructions and successfully incapacitates the machine by sabotaging its inner workings. Later in the day, Paul and Klara meet with Josie, Chrissy, Rick, and Helen in a cafe. Helen makes awkward conversation with Paul about the impoverished and unstable community where Paul lives. Rick and Helen have a meeting that day with Vance, the former friend of Helen's who now works at Atlas Brookings. Josie implores Rick to do his best to impress Vance. Klara listens to a conversation between Chrissy and Helen. It becomes evident from the conversation that Josie's illness was likely caused by the genetic editing or lifting process. Helen says that, even in spite of witnessing Josie's illness, Helen regrets not having Rick lifted. Vance arrives, so Paul, Chrissy, and Josie leave. They allow Klara to stay as a type of chaperone and companion for Rick and Helen. It becomes evident that Helen and Vance used to be lovers at some point. Rick presents Vance with a notebook in which Rick has designed advanced, remotely controlled flying drones, which could be used for surveillance purposes. Setting aside the ethical issues, Vance states that he is quite impressed with this level of engineering skill from a teenage boy. Rick states that he is not seeking favoritism from Vance, only that he believes he is worthy of attending Atlas Brookings. However, when Vance presses this point, Helen says that they are seeking favoritism from Vance. Vance becomes indignant, and he begins to speak openly about his and Helen's relationship history. He accuses Helen of having badly mistreated him in the past. Helen begins apologizing profusely, and she begs forgiveness from Vance. Rick becomes mortified, and he asks his mother not to debase herself. It is ambiguous to what degree Helen is sincere in her apologies, and to what degree she is simply trying to placate Vance and win his support for Rick's sake. Vance departs without giving a clear answer on whether he will help Rick. Pages 252-303. After Vance leaves, Helen says that she believes Vance will still help them. Helen says that Vance is the type of person who likes to help other people in order to feel superior. Rick feels mortified by Helen's self-debasement. Rick and Helen return Klara to Chrissy and Josie. Klara, Chrissy, and Josie stay in a hotel overnight. Klara is confident that the sun will heal Josie in the morning, since Klara destroyed the Cooting's machine. However, Josie appears to still be sickly in the morning. As Chrissy, Klara, and Josie drive out of town, Klara sees a different coatings machine in use. She realizes that there is more than one machine, and she laments that Josie will likely die soon since Klara did not succeed in her quest to end pollution. Part 5 begins 11 days later. Josie experiences another major downturn in her health, and it appears that she might be in imminent danger of death. Klara returns to the barn at sunset in order to plead again with the sun. While speaking to the sun, Klara pleads with it to help Josie, even though Klara failed to stop pollution from occurring. Josie recalls the time when she saw a man and woman tearfully reunite in the street. She recalls how brightly the sun shone on them, and she concludes that the sun has an affinity for strong emotional attachments between people. Klara says to the sun that Josie and Rick have an equally strong emotional attachment, and so the sun should save Josie in order to preserve Josie and Rick's relationship. The sun sets, and Klara hopes that her arguments to the sun were persuasive enough. Josie's health continues to decline in the following days, and Chrissy becomes increasingly distraught. Chrissy misdirects her distress in the form of anger towards Rick. Rick remains calm and relays a message from Josie. Josie does not blame Chrissy for her illness, and Josie does not wish that she or Chrissy had done anything differently. Suddenly, Klara notices the sun shining especially brightly. Klara feels that this must be the sun's special nourishment. She goes to Josie's room and opens the curtains. In the light of the sun, Josie suddenly feels stronger and healthier. In part 6, Josie makes a full recovery from her illness. Chrissy is incredulous, but Klara continues to believe that the sun was responsible for this recovery. Several years pass. Josie prepares to apply to colleges. She and Rick remain friends, but there is no romantic attachment between them. Rick chooses not to attend Atlas Brookings as he still does not approve of how Helen attempted to manipulate Vance. Rick still shows much promise as an engineer, and he believes he will be able to make a living designing surveillance drones. Josie leaves for college, and Klara spends most of her time alone in the house's attic. Klara feels happy that she fulfilled her purpose of being a good companion to Josie. Capaldi arrives and asks Klara to serve as a subject to him in his studies of artificial intelligence. Klara politely declines. Clara's lifespan is short and will soon come to an end. Before that time, the manager from Clara's store comes to the house to briefly visit her.